We are on.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the New Strength Way podcast. Today from the New Strength bunker, or my garage, we have Movement Maestro, Rod Cooper. This guy has been on the podcast before, so I think this might make you the first or second returning guest that's outside of a gym. So Ellen just beat you a couple of weeks ago, coming back on for a second one.
I'm happy to be back on.
But Rod, we've got you here. Obviously, you are a gun when it comes to bodyweight movements, gymnastics, mobility, that sort of stuff. And everyone right now is basically, unless they've got their gyms kitted up, is basically limited to bodyweight training. And the trend that I'm kind of seeing at the moment is everyone's just doing reps and reps and reps of the most basic movements going around. Then we see your Instagram, and that's not the case. You're doing cool stuff with your bodyweight. You're really testing a lot of these other pieces that you can do, and I know that's how you approach it with your clients. So I wanted to get you on to talk about one, like, why do you do it that way, and then also like what's some benefits for some people that if they might think about doing their adding a little bit more complexity, or like trying to make their training a little bit more challenging with their body weight. So I guess first of all, like if you want to give the guys that haven't heard from you before, I'm sure they follow you on Instagram. Everyone follows you on Instagram, right?
I've got a couple of followers.
But if you want to quickly give a rundown of yourself, your background in the movement space, and then we'll go from there.
Cool. Yeah. So owner of the Movement Collective. We've had that business for around 5 years.
Man, that's crazy. Now
I kind of missed the 5th birthday as well. That happened last month, and all this stuff's going on, so I just totally missed it. And I looked at the date a couple of days ago. I was like, oh shit, missed our 5th birthday. Anyway, happy birthday, TMC.
There needs to be a big party for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once we go back, we're gonna have a big celebration for sure.
That's cool. That's exciting.
So we're over in Waratah at the moment, and we've got a bunch of different classes. We've got anti-fragile classes, which is centered around stability, mobility work, kind of lower level in terms of complexity and skill. But still just as important as any of the other movements that we're doing. So we've got Dan and Damo teaching those classes.
Damo's due to come on the podcast soon.
Is he? Cool.
We tried to tee it up just before everything. Actually, I was meant to go the day that we had Millie. I was meant to go on the Sunday. I cancelled on the Saturday because Jess wasn't very well, starting to get like where we thought it might have happened soon. And then basically Millie came along when I was meant to be podcasting with Damo.
He was supposed to come on yours, or you were going to go on his?
We were going to do both.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so
sweet.
I'm yet to tee back up with Damo for that yet, but I'll reach out to him soon, I'd say.
Catch up with him for sure. Yeah, so they've been teaching the classes Monday through to Friday, and yeah, those classes are around anti-fragility. So you're building that strength and stability. And then we've got movement classes, and the movement classes pretty much entail most bodyweight exercises that we can possibly do. So we've got hand balancing, there could be some acrobatics, there could be gymnastic strength work, so on the rings, on the bar, kind of calisthenics style. Something that I've been interested in recently is kind of dance, contemporary dance and acrobatics. So that's been showing up a lot, some locomotion like floor work as well, and some coordination drills. So another thing that's kind of come up in the last, say, 12 months has been juggling. So in between my rest sets for strength work, I've been juggling and starting to, grasp the concept a little bit. So I can do 4 balls now and starting to work on 5.
Nice. That's impressive. I always thought, I thought I was finally cool when I finally got the 3 balls, and like 4 balls just messes with me.
So yes, maybe I can teach you after this. I'll give you a little rundown. It's like, I really like juggling too. So juggling for me, it's like, it's so interesting because you can progress so fast. And this is one of the reasons why we teach it in class as well, because building strength and mobility can sometimes take months, as you would know. But with juggling, it's like you could do one session and really have a huge breakthrough and go from juggling 3 balls to the next level and juggling 4 balls in literally one session. So it's really cool to see that fast progress. And we know that progress is fun. So if you've got a skill that you're working on and you can progress quite rapidly, well, then you're more excited to take it to the next level.
Yeah, the other thing that I find super cool with juggling that I think is underappreciated is like, you can try to juggle 3 balls or 4 balls or whatever that level is that you're up to, and you can be trying for so long, and you only need to just be shown the missing link, and instantly that's how it works. Like I remember when I first learned to juggle 3 balls, it was at it was Keegan Smith's Real Movement Project seminar. We got chucked in there, and me and a few of the boys were down there. And one of the guys could do it really well, but he tried to teach us in the lead up because we know it's coming, and he just didn't know why he could do it. But he's like, oh, you just do it like this sort of thing. And then in the workshop, I don't think it was Keegan teaching. I think it was somebody else teaching that piece. But it was like, throw it through the center back to you continuously, and that's how you do it. And I was like, as soon as I did that, and it was kind of just like flowing it back, even though like visually you're not going straight into the center and throwing it back, but that's the process and the thought behind it.
Yeah.
Instantly it started to click, and I was like, bang, bang, bang. Oh, cool. I've got them. I still held on to them, starting to sync it together. And then before I knew it, I was able to like do it without thinking about it anymore. And it was just simply knowing that piece. And I think the super cool thing about it when I got to that was like, that's the exact same reason why you need coaches in everything, like training, in business, in whatever it is, because it's like, you can try for a while and maybe you might have success, but as soon as you figure out that one link and how to do it like well, everything like escalates so quickly.
Yeah, cool. So
that's why we have you here, so we can learn like what's those little things with movement and body weight strength and that sort of stuff as well. Like that's why you're on.
So yeah, I would love to teach you that 4-ball pattern, and it's slightly different. And after jumping in and like starting juggling and understanding some of the patterns now, it's really interesting. Like you said before, like those aha moments, and I feel like you can have them every single session, and it's just so exciting. Just like, oh, I get it now, and you have these realizations. Another thing that comes up is time seems to slow down. So you'll find this with any skill that you learn, not just juggling. But when you learn something, you've kind of like holding tension and you're thinking about, and everything's going a million miles an hour. But then once you kind of grasp it, once you have those aha moments, 3 balls for me now, it's like, I could do it almost with my eyes closed, and it feels like they're moving in slow motion. But then you compare that to 4 balls or 5 balls, and it's very chaotic. So it's like adapting to that chaos and allowing the brain to kind of understand what's happening, because in the beginning it's just like, wow, you're just throwing the balls up and you just run around trying to catch them. But that's just really interesting. I just love that process of learning a new skill and having everything slow down so you can kind of calm down. And I just love it.
That's cool, man. And I love that you incorporate it in with strength work, because like it gives something for like, typically a lot of the people when they get new to doing strength stuff, they feel like they can't rest because they're so used to this, like everything is go in training, or like the way that mainstream training is being pushed is like everything's about high intensity, high speed, like no rest breaks and that sort of stuff. And like that's a small subset of like how to add value to your training. So to see that you guys, like, instead of getting suckered into that, and instead of just telling people just sit down, don't do anything, it's like, here's something else that we can work on in between that's not going to impact on the results that you get negatively, but it's going to engage you so that you take the proper amount of rest so you can go back to your muscle up or handstand push up and give equal amount of quality work in from set to set, rather than going and doing one set that's quality, and then because you've rested too short, you end up with like 3 good reps out of your training and the rest of it's like low quality shitty work that's not actually getting you closer to your goal.
So I just don't know how to mind blank.
That's the cool thing about like how you guys have integrated like the whole pieces of the puzzle of what you guys do movement wise. It's not just gymnastic strength training. Like there is places that do just that, I know, around, and there's places that just teach dance and just teach the acrobatics. And
it's all about that integration.
And then you guys, like, I guess like it's within the name of the movement collective. It's like there's no stone unturned in movement. I know you guys still do weightlifting classes and have. Is it still Justin teaching them?
Yeah, we had Justin teaching before
until
we had little lockdown. But juggling is just one thing that we can do in the rest time. Like you said, it's really nice to utilize that time. That's what we try to do, because not everyone has infinite amount of time to spend training. So it's like, if we are resting from our strength work, how can we then utilize the time? So mostly I'm doing mobility. So it's not always juggling. Mobility is such a good element to add into, because it's going to add to your training as well as make you feel good. So what we'd normally do with that, to say if like we're training upper body, we'd always train lower body mobility. So we're not taking away from the strength work that we're actually working on.
Yeah.
So it could be, you know, if you're doing upper body and you start to do upper body mobility, maybe it's too much, a bit of an overload. So we always try to do the opposite to what we're doing for that day, just utilizing the time.
Awesome. So let's touch on like, we want to go through like the idea of like getting away from the let's just do more reps of really, really basic low level exercises.
Really don't like that, do you? You see those videos, you're like, oh, why do they just keep repping it out?
Yeah, I despise the fact of just like turning everything into like hit circuits. I think there's so much more value in training to do a wide encompassing thing, and just to be limited within that is, I think, holding people back from having a really, really great positive training experience and learning the lessons that they can add to the rest of their life from training. So when we come into the stuff that you guys teach with bodyweight gymnastics work, and what are some of like the staple pieces that are kind of like things that people aspire to once they're in the movement collective culture?
Are you talking about a specific skill or strength?
What are some strength movements or some skills that require that strength development there?
I'd say like the first one would be a handstand. That always comes up in our practice, and people come to us to learn the handstand, maybe because we, 90% of our posts are around handstands. It's because we love it, we want to share and we practice exactly what we're teaching. So that would be the first thing, and I think that there's so many different components of the handstand as well. You're learning balance, you're learning to get inverted, you have to learn coordination as well, and also like core stability and strength in the shoulders. So there's just so many different elements to the handstand that makes it beneficial, not only just for the body itself, like physically, but also mentally as well.
Yeah.
It's very challenging.
Yeah, cool. And then that obviously leads into other stuff of like, once you got the handstand dialed, like there's so many more avenues that come off the back end of that, right? Like you've got really, really common in CrossFit circles, there's like the handstand push-up, against the wall, but I know you do ones like there's no wall there, like it's just straight up handstand push-ups.
Yeah. So I think, what you were talking about before, and I think what annoys you is like the lack of complexity inside the movement practice, or from what you're seeing from people. And it's like, we look at it as horizontal skill development. So if someone's doing a squat, for instance, and they just keep repping out squats, and they're not looking to change the complexity of it, it's just moving in a horizontal pattern. So it's like something that's like similar to the squat, maybe it's like a goblet squat, or they just change it slightly. We'd see that as a horizontal, it's kind of on the same plane.
Yeah.
But if what we look at is like, how do we move to the next level? Like, how do we bring it up a level? And it's called vertical skill development. So with the handstand, bringing in that handstand push-up. So not only going from a straight arm position and being strong and stable there, but can we break at the elbows, come all the way down to the ground, even into a deficit, and then come all the way back up into a straight arm? It's just adding that complexity, especially taking it off the wall as well. There's just a lot of elements in there. And I think I crave that. And also the guys that are training with us as well, we don't want to just keep repping out the same boring exercise over and over again. We're always on the lookout for like, what's the next thing? It's like having that curiosity to think, how do I make this harder? Or how do I take it to the next level? Yeah,
and that's the cool thing, is like you guys then find these skills that are like, I guess they're like pinnacle skills for a lot of people. Like I can't do freestanding handstands for very long, and I'm like, that'd be so good if I could just get to that. And it's like, that's kind of like for a lot of the members that I see from you guys, and then your own development over time, because we've been friends for a long time, is like, that's kind of like gateways to new worlds in movement. Like you get the handstand down, it's like now there's opportunity to go to like all these different avenues from the top of that level, and the same with like the muscle up, right? Like you get the muscle up down pat, and then that's only really like
getting to the top of the rings.
That gets you to the top of the rings, and then you can there's another world there. So that's a really, really super cool thing. What would you say for like somebody who wants to start to incorporate some of this like more advanced movement practices in? What are some methods of like training those pieces? And maybe we can talk for like the foundations of building like handstand to handstand push-up stuff, and then muscle ups and pull-up sort of work. Just to make it simple for a lot of listeners. But what are some of the methods that you use to then allow people to progressively go towards where they're then opening up the possibility of the world of movement for them?
So I think the mobility comes into it, making sure we've got enough mobility for the particular movement that we're working on. So there's probably three different things: there's strength, mobility, and then this patterning of the skill. So for handstands, for an example, we would want to make sure that we've got enough mobility in the shoulders to get like a stacked position. So we're not like fighting the position that we are in a handstand. There's many ways to do that. I don't think we could go over all the different ways, but basically opening up the shoulders.
Just buy the TMC handstand program if you want.
Yeah, there you go. Give it a
Shameless
little plug.
plug.
And then working on the skill development. So it's just like, what position do we need to be in the handstand to hold it? But then there's the rebalance as well for the handstand. So it's like finding the position is one thing, but then it's like once we remove ourselves from the wall to make it more complex, how do we rebalance? So it's like understanding the importance of the hands on the ground and how they rebalance, the position of the elbows, the shoulders, the spine, the hips. How can we manipulate ourselves to keep that balance and to take it to that next level? So also, so the mobility, the skill, and also the strength as well. So working on strength and endurance for the handstand. So do we have enough strength in the core to hold ourselves in that hollow body position, the position that we need for the handstand? Or is the core really weak and we're like always going to this like arch position, into this like banana back handstand, which you see so often? So there's a bunch of different components that always go into a certain skill. It's never just like one thing. If we just like, work on the strength, we're going to have it. I find mobility one of the biggest things when it comes to press to handstand, handstand push-ups, pull-ups, all that kind of stuff. Mobility is like seems to be the missing component when it comes to a lot of people's training.
Yeah, cool, awesome. So what would be some of the protocols that we could use on both, or like maybe what's some simple? Let's start with the mobility first, and then we'll move on to the strength stuff. So if that seems to be the missing link, let's hit in with that first. If I needed to improve my mobility through let's just say in general, like my just general shoulder and hip mobility, what would be a couple like bang for your buck things that you would go towards? And then like there is talk in mobility, like should you do like loaded stretching, passive, active, dynamic? Like what are some of like your favorite protocols when it comes to that for taking somebody who might be already lifting a little bit, not necessarily like completely fresh, so they've got a little bit of muscular strength, but they might be a little bit tightly bound because of that. This is completely selfish for myself here. But what would be some bang for your buck things for like developing the flexibility through the hips and then also the shoulders for a variety of the movements that we've talked about?
So I think for the hips, there's many exercises that we use, and we try to find the most bang for your buck exercises because there's literally a million things that we could be doing with inside strength and mobility and our movement practice. But I think split stretching would be a great place to start. So the middle splits, that's with your feet going out to the side. So working on the adductors. An active position is always good, and contract and relax. So we use both those techniques. Front splits, so hitting the hip flexors and also the hamstrings in that front split position. So that's left leg forward or right leg forward. I would pick both of those, and also the pancake position comes up a lot. So that's when your legs are in a straddle position, you're seated on the ground. So this also helps with the hip hinge, so say like a deadlift position, hip hinge, and trying to get flat to the ground. So the weighted pancake in that position would be awesome. We also use some techniques like ballistic techniques. So there's one really cool method for that pancake position, which is really beneficial for the press to handstand if you're looking to take your handstand entry to the next level and work on the press. So the press to handstand, if you don't understand that, it's like placing your hands down on the ground and you kind of float your legs up into the handstand instead of jumping or kicking into it.
And that's with straight arms, right? Like
with straight arms.
There's no actual, like I think everyone that's into lifting thinks press, they think bending or straightening their arms. This is an already straight position.
So your arms completely locked out, so it's a straight arm movement. So your arms are locked out, you lean into it, so protracted scapula, and you keep that position. So the shoulders are in an elevated position as well. So your scapula is elevated, protracted, and then you've just got to lift your legs up into a handstand position.
Incredible amount of strength that goes into that, right?
And then there's, the stall to press, there's different ways that you can progress that again. I don't think there's no roof to this stuff. There's always that next level, which is really exciting and interesting. But I would say for the hips, opening up those positions, so opening up the middle split, the front splits would be a great start, and using the techniques of time under tension, so spending some time in that range. Maybe you hang on to something first if you can't handle it, because a lot of people, if they haven't stretched those positions, it can be quite brutal for them to spend any amount of time. So you can actually go into the positions and hang on to something just to take a little bit of load off until it's tolerable. and then you keep progressing from there.
Yeah.
But I really do like active to passive. I think there's
Yeah.
benefit in both. Active definitely to build some strength and stability around the joint, and also so it's applicable to any movement that we want to do. I wouldn't do like passive stretching alone. I don't think that's the most effective way to build like a strong, healthy split. But I do use it after I've done the active work.
Yeah. So you typically, when you're talking about like contract relax sort of work, is that like 5 seconds on, 5 seconds off, like stuff like that? Or
exactly, yeah. So finding the position, again, there's many ways to go about it, but like holding says say like a 30-second active position, and within that time you can play around with that contract and relax. 5 seconds is normally a good, so you can build it up from 10% all the way to 100%. So that's one way of kind of like this bell curve, or you can just like full on 100% contraction of the areas that you're working, depending on what split you're doing. 100% contraction around 3 rounds of that, and then moving into a passive position. Because straight away it's like overriding that stretch reflex. So, you see a difference straight away from doing contract and relax. Plus we're building that isometric strength in that position as well, which is like, it's a win for sure.
Yeah, awesome. And so if we're talking hips, then like the foundation pieces, the like middle split, front split, and our pancake that we want to work on. What about for the shoulders, like the shoulders and the upper back piece?
Yeah,
like if somebody, I guess, if we're looking at the two movements a lot of people would be looking towards that are coming from a lifting background and looking at the gymnastic strength stuff is like their handstand stuff and the muscle ups again. So obviously that takes both ends of the spectrum. If you obviously need flexion and you also need the extension range to get in the bottom of that dip. Yeah. What would be some ways that we would go about them?
So for the shoulders, just to keep it nice and simple, I would say flexion extension. So flexion, any overhead movement, we do one in a hollow body position. So hollow body is where you lay flat on the ground on your back. You tuck the pelvis under, legs go out, and then arms overhead. So this is like traditionally used in gymnastics, also called the dish position. But we've been doing one with this where we hold a little weight. So we maintain that position. So we want to keep that pelvis tucked under, core nice and tight, so we're not moving through the spine at all. So we're kind of locking the spine down, and then we're moving the shoulders like overhead range through that flexion, and we're hanging on to a small weight. So we're moving in and out of that range for say 10 reps, and then a 10-second hold at the bottom, and then trying to relax down and try to gain some range out of that. That would just be one simple exercise. And also extension, so looking at the skin the cat or the German hang before you do the skin the cat. So that's on the rings where the shoulders are coming back or the arms are coming back behind your body, sinking into that position and eventually beginning to take some load through that extended position.
Yeah, awesome. And I think to touch on that, because obviously one of the things there that people might not realize, I know that I got from you when we first started playing around with that a long time ago, is do not do palms facing forward or down to start off with if you're just starting off with that, because particularly if you're strong, you will tear a bicep.
A lot of pressure on the bicep, yeah. That's how the gymnasts would train it, because they can pull through back into this position, but we always train it the other way.
Yeah. So palms facing away from you is the key there. Before you guys listen to this podcast, try it and then whinge to us about tearing a bicep.
And just like anything, load it up really slowly. So the way that we'd progress someone, we'd have the rings say around head height. You just take one back and then the other back, and then you just kind of sink into it really slowly. So you basically just squat down directly underneath the rings. What tends to happen, what I've seen over time from training a lot of beginners, is that it's about the position initially, and the position kind of almost feels like your arm's going to tear off. And I experienced the same thing when I first started, because I was just going to the gym before I started doing the movement practice and started doing any mobility work. And I got into that position. I had enough strength to pull myself around on the bar, but I got into that end range and I just felt like both my arms are going to tear off my body. So it was like this intense pain through my bicep, through front delt into the chest. So sink into it. If you are getting that feeling like you feel like your arm's going to tear off, just go nice and slow into it, sink into it till eventually you can pull one knee up, and keeping active through the shoulders as well, through the scap. So one knee up, and then eventually we can lift that other leg up.
Are you pulling down through the shoulders or trying to pull back when you're
I almost think about two actions of pulling. So I think about pulling the rings down, so the shoulders are coming down, pulling the rings down, and then also lifting up with the knees. So I always talk about this too. It's kind of hard to describe right now, but two actions of pulling the shoulders down, making sure that we're staying strong and stable through the shoulders, Once you've been practicing this for a while, you can move into a passive position, skin the cat, and just like hang there, and that's okay. But I would suggest in the beginning, if you're fairly new to that range, to stay active.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. Cool. So now we've covered a little bit of mobility stuff. What would be some of the protocols that you would use to, say, build the strength pieces for those movements there as well for people?
Yeah. So for which particular, like say for the handstand?
Let's say the handstand and the handstand push up against the wall. What if somebody's trying to build the shoulder and the pressing strength for that, and then also to be able to build the actual like motor control and like core strength and that for a full handstand? What would be some of the pieces that you would use for that? Saying they're already like reasonably strong, they're not coming from like they're only just doing their first push up now, like they're probably close and they just need to like get a little bit more of that directed approach that we were talking about before with the juggling. Is just knowing that piece is like those people that are like on that borderline, or maybe they're just getting a rep but it's pretty ugly. Like how would they go about like just building that up there? Would you just tell them to do one rep at a time, or what are some of the techniques that you could use to build up to doing multiples there?
So there's progressions for everything. Let's look at the handstand push-up first. So one variation would be to put your hands up on a box, depending on, you said that the person is like reasonably strong, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the first progression we'd normally use for most people would be the pike push-up. So it's almost like a downward dog position. What we want to do first is track the shoulders first, then break at the elbows and place the forehead down in front of the hands. It almost creates this like triangle pattern. And then that position translates through all of the variations, even into the most advanced variations where you're doing deficit handstand push-ups or you're adding weight, things like that. So that is really good to kind of build the pattern of like, what does the handstand push-up look like, and to build that strength. I find that too many people go to the wall straight away, and I think going back to the wall and doing this big arch and just moving in and out of the range is probably not the best place to start. Even for myself, I can do freestanding handstand push-ups, but actually going back to the wall and keeping this really strict form, if you go chest to the wall, it's really difficult. So I think for most people, it's like let's knock it back a few notches and start at a really low level and build that up. So we're really proficient in that movement, that baseline, and then we can build that up as time goes on.
Yeah, nice. So what would you go to after that, like that first step of the pike push-up?
Yeah, so then I'd go elevation of the feet. So on a small box or up on your couch or on a bench. So start to elevate the feet, still maintaining that position. You don't want to flatten out, like make it more of a push-up. You want to keep the weight in the shoulders. So again, tracking those shoulders forward, breaking or bending at the elbows, touching that head down, and then coming back up into that similar position where your butt is kind of stacked. Yeah. What we want to do is just keep simulating that end position. Like, let's have a look at what that looks like in the end. And then how do we regress that to a level that's like doable for most people for multiple reps? Because we don't just want to be working in like, 1 rep max all the time. It's like, how do we take it back to a level that we can start to build some volume up and some strength around the connective tissue as well as the muscle, and build them up slowly, progressively, so they can reach that end result at some point. But it's not going to happen in the first day. Yeah,
awesome. And then after you get to that point, then progressing them to the wall once they've got some proficiency to do some reps with quality in those good positions in the elevated.
Definitely, yeah. So go to the wall after that. So chest to the wall, like I said before. So trying to keep that nice hollow body position, so you don't want to move into an arch. For me, it's like getting down to the ground and then that initial push from the bottom. People tend to go into that arch, so it's like just trying to be nice and slow and controlled. If you can't do a full rep, same with any strength building exercise, we could just potentially do the negative portion.
Yeah.
So the eccentrics, just coming down super slow and controlled, building that time under tension, so we get nice and strong, just moving through that range, and then slowly progress it like that. And then when you've got the balance, if you work on the handstand off the wall and you've got that, then you kind of join the pieces together. And I think this is really cool with the movement practice as well, because if you work on all these different elements, it's not isolated to that one area. So it's really cool to work on one thing and then something that seems very different, and then being able to like kind of mold them together.
Yeah, 100%. Cool, that's awesome. If we take that to the muscle up now, let's say you've got somebody there strong enough they're doing a couple of pull-ups, they're doing their dips pretty proficiently on the rings, they just can't put it all together. What are some of the steps back for those guys to work through with that there on the rings?
Yeah, so we always take it back to the transition. And this comes up a lot because the pull up, they've got the pull ups down, they've got the dips down. So it's like, I can't do the thing, I can't do the muscle up. So we always take them back down to the transition work. So that's the piece connecting the pull and the push. So we would just get them drilling this transition like over and over again for like, say like for a round could be like 60 seconds or like multiple reps, right? 20 reps or something like that. Just really drilling it, not putting any weight into the arms as well. So we're not using this as like building strength in that position, not in the beginning anyway. It's like just getting that patterning down just like over and over again, just so it's like, it's almost like second nature. So they don't have to think about it. Because what I've seen is like when people go to do the pull up and if they don't know, so the muscle up, if they don't know the position like, and they haven't drilled that enough, it's like they're thinking about too many different things, right? They're thinking about the pull, the turn, they're like, where do I pull it? And it just doesn't happen. So it's like, let's get that down so it's basically automatic. So then when it comes to do the full movement, the pull to the push, it just happens. Yeah. So the transition, and then we start to load that up. So another one that I like to do is the baby muscle up. So it's actually taking them, just like the handstand push up, finding a progression that simulates that final movement that you really want to work on, or the goal. And then you try to bring that down. How do we make it easier so we can rep it out multiple times so the nervous system and your brain kind of understands the movement pattern? So the baby muscle up's perfect for that. So it uses the transition, but we also lower down in that false grip position. So we lower down in false grip, pull to the chest, do that transition that we've worked on. We can either jump or push to the top. If they can already do dips, they can definitely push to the top, get to the top, lock it out, and then slowly come down. The progression after that would be to get to the top and do the slow negative without the feet on the ground.
Yeah, so baby muscle ups with feet on the ground, just supporting.
Yeah. And then progressions from that, it's normally just like, it's some, it takes people some time, and I think the explosiveness from the bottom comes into it as well. So I don't think working on slow negatives the whole time, because the movement in the beginning is quite explosive. Like you get to the bottom and you're like, boom, you reef into that high pull into the chest and then you transition. So I don't think only working on the slow negatives is the most ideal way. You've got to kind of go and test it. So you've got to test that, 1 rep max and see where they get to. I even like helping them through it as well. So like get the ring set up where they can grab the false grip and it's like, all right, let's go. And they pull into it and maybe you just help them that little bit. Again, it's helping to repattern and getting them to understand like what the movement feels like under full load.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. And I think the great thing there is like there's this like step-by-step approach to it. And I know when I learned how to do muscle ups without anyone really teaching me, it was literally just throw myself on the ring and try to do it until I figured it out. And like, admittedly, I got there pretty quickly, but I was also...
It's a method for sure.
Yeah, at that point, I was also doing 15 plus pull-ups. I could do like 10 to 15 ring dips, no troubles there. Like I was already fairly strong, fairly athletic in that sort of way. And it was kind of just, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't like to the degree of like how nice or like strict a muscle up looks when you see somebody like yourself or Vic do it. But it was for the point in time, it was like all I knew was like I'd see people just throwing themselves above the ring. So I just did that and then got it there eventually. And then it's kind of been a muscle up's been this refining thing over time. It's like, how can I make it slower now? How can I make it more technical? And then that's where like guys like yourself, when I've done stuff with you and played through these actual drills, I'm like, this is how it's actually meant to work.
Just like the juggling, right? The missing components. You're like, okay, like there might be one little cue that you get from a coach. And
that takes you from like doing 1 or 2 ugly muscle ups to then getting, I think my record is like 5 or 6 in a row. Awesome. Still fairly loose, like while still throwing into it a little bit, but for a guy that doesn't practice them a lot, like just doing those little changes and like getting a little bit of refinement, I was like, like that's a big jump in a small period of time just for the right little pieces there.
I think it's important to note the refinement as well and understanding that comes with time. You're not going to, I think a lot of people get fixated on this perfect movement and doing it perfectly for their first rep when they have never done it in the past. It's like, it's never going to be perfect. It's going to be ugly. You're going to be like pulling this weird face and you're just going to just reef it up there and eventually you'll get it. Same with the press to handstand. A good example is Damo is working on the press to handstand at the moment, that straight arm press on the ground.
Too. He's going to, like, that's a hard thing.
So there's a few things that he needs to work on and he's starting to get it, but it's not perfect, right? It's like the arms are a little bit bent and the legs are bent, but he's like getting through that motion. So I think it's really important to kind of work on the foundations and doing things like, to a certain quality, but also not holding yourself back from, thinking that it's going to be perfect on the first rep. It's like, it's kind of nice to kind of move into it and just do a few ugly reps so you can understand it. And that refinement can happen over time. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I really kind of encourage people to, to go for it sometimes and not beat themselves up if it's not 100%.
Yeah, that's a pretty common thing now that you mention it. And we won't hold on it for too long because I don't want to leave us here talking about like off-topic stuff, but it's really, really common when people like get through that first, like whether it's they do their first 200 kilo deadlift or their first muscle up, and they get down from it and they're all pumped and you're like, dude, that was awesome. And they're like, oh, I don't think my back was very straight on that one. Like I don't think it was my best rep. And I was like, yeah, but that's not the point right now. You just did something that you've been working towards for so long.
You got to celebrate those wins.
Enjoy
Always
that.
Celebrate the wins.
Like you don't have to worry about like, is it the nicest? Like, we'll clean that up later. Like, enjoy the fact that you got the win. So I think that's like you never see somebody in a game of footy or whatever come off after scoring the match-winning try and like, oh, it wasn't my prettiest try. Like, I don't know whether I should deserve the credit for that. They're like, dude, I won that game for the team and I am the man.
Yeah.
They own that shit. But then when we get to like a movement or something like that, we get really critical if it's not perfect straight away.
Why is that though? Like, is that part of our culture to kind of like self-judge? Is it because we're worried about other people saw it and they're like, oh, like, it wasn't perfect. It should have been perfect. I wonder what that is or where that comes from. Yeah,
I think that's a rabbit hole conversation.
Let's not go down there.
Let's not do that on this episode, but it might come up in the future. But Rod, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time, man. I think there's been some really, really good nuggets here for some people that want to play around with some cool gymnastics, strength work and bodyweight strength work. And then apply that to the rest of their training too, because I think that's the really cool stuff. It's like when you've got that strength for the advanced handstand drills, the muscle ups, a lot of that then carries over for like if they've got a lifting background or that's where they're coming from. Like I know in the girls, typically the best young weightlifters were the best former gymnasts that stopped doing gymnastics, and I think there's a lot of carryover towards stuff like your overhead movements in weightlifting, strongman, everything like that comes from building up these gymnastic strength stuff. Particularly if you're heavy, it's not really an excuse to not get good at these. It just means it might take a little bit more time and a little bit more work.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to reach out to the Rod Cooper, what's the best way to find out more about Rod?
I would say, on Instagram, like Rod J Cooper, just send me a message. And the stuff that we spoke about today is, I don't know if I explained it too well, but a lot of it's hard to explain. You've kind of got, it's very visual. So if you've got any questions on anything that we spoke about, I'm quite happy to help, coach you through any specific movements or help you get little breakthroughs in any of your movement, or even how to structure it as well. Like we spoke about juggling and skill development and mobility. Like how do we actually structure that into our program? I'm quite happy to have a conversation around that as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, mate. I appreciate it. Guys, thanks for listening. Make sure you reach out to Rod if you enjoyed it. Let him know that you got a lot from it, and we will see you next week.